Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the Cycle Podcast. I really appreciate you being here and listening. I hope this podcast is bringing you value. Halfway through the year, 8 episodes in, I'm really happy with how everything's going. I hope you are too. I just feel, as someone who suffered from this disease for 20 years, that I wanted to bring information and awareness to you, and I hope that this podcast is doing that. Endo affects everybody differently, so I thought there was no better way to showcase that than actually talking to women who have been going through the motions with this disease. Today I talked to Anna. She has been through a lot with her disease and it has affected multiple organs for her. I think you will find this conversation very helpful. And if you have any questions or you need help, you are not alone. 200 million women have this disease. If you're at the beginning, middle, or end of your journey, I'd like to be here to help support you. You can reach out to me on my website, www.melissaboudreau.com. Also linked in the podcast, so you don't have to remember how to spell my name. You can also find me on Instagram at endo_lady, or my personal is at melisbou, MELISBOU. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hey everybody, I'm really excited to have Anna on our podcast today. She and I don't know each other very well, but we have definitely met in person, and I'm really excited to get to know her and her story. So Anna, I'm going to let you take it away. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Anna. I have had endometriosis for as long as I can remember, since the first time I had gotten my period. And I've had, how many surgeries now, I guess? I've had about 4 surgeries since then. And most recent 2 I had in the last few months since September.
Okay, and how old are you?
I'm 34.
Okay, and you live in New York, right?
I do. I live on Long Island. Yep.
Okay, live in Long Island. And okay, so any other like fun facts you want to share before we get into all the endo stuff?
Ooh, fun facts. I was born in Italy.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I came here when I was, I don't know if it's fun fact, but it's a cool fact, I guess. I came here when I was 6. And actually my husband and I, we go back every year. We're actually heading back next Tuesday to see family for 2 weeks.
It's definitely on my bucket list, a place to go. And I plan on eating all the dairy and gluten that I don't eat now when I go to Italy.
I'm from southern Italy.
Okay.
So everything is like homemade and fresh and made right then. So really nothing, it's crazy, but not as much bothers me there in terms of what bothers me here.
I've heard that. Food. I've heard that multiple times. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, let's just start from the beginning. When did you have your first period? Do you remember how old you were?
I got my period pretty late. I was 14.
Okay.
When I got my period.
All right. And when you first got it, did you have pain early on, or was it normal as it can be when you're 14, 15, 16?
I guess when you're that age, it's hard to decipher what's normal,
right,
in terms of pain. So for a while I thought it was, and I guess it wasn't very painful in the beginning. I don't remember it being that bad. I think it was when I was like around 16 that I really started noticing that something was off compared to my friends. My mom has endometriosis. She's now in menopause, but so she definitely says she doesn't suffer as much that she used to.
Was she diagnosed with it? Do you know?
She was. She's had surgeries before, yeah.
And so when you were 16 and starting to notice that it was different from your friends, did your mom at that point say, like, you may have endometriosis?
She did. And we were seeing the same gynecologist. So he said, the first thing he said to me was, I think it's endometriosis. And I waited a while to have surgery at that point. I guess me and my mom still felt that I was relatively young. They did the normal things that they do in terms of putting you on birth control pills, trying to manage the pain. But it was when I was in my teens and early 20s, actually, the pain was probably the most severe I've ever had.
I mean, not that anything about endo is amazing, but the one really different thing that from your story, from anyone else that I've ever talked to, is that your mom knew and your doctor told you early on. Because some women, it takes, 5, 7, 10 years for them to get diagnosed.
Yeah.
So your doctor knew and your mom knew. But how were you getting through like high school
Yeah,
and
it
dealing with it? Did you miss school? Did you go on birth
a lot.
control? What
Yeah.
did you do?
I guess that's the interesting part that you say that too, because like a lot of the women I have met have been misdiagnosed for years. But I think, I mean, now I'm being 34. So when I was 16, people knew about endo, but I mean, and I don't know if excision surgery existed then, but it definitely wasn't considered the gold standard. A lot of doctors weren't available to really do the surgery. So I guess even though I knew I had it, I don't think people understood how bad it could be and what it could really cause. So it's kind of like, oh, you have endo, or you have endometriosis, or it's the same. And I really got the same definition over and over again, which was, the lining of your uterus is growing outside. And that's
Right.
all anyone ever told me. And that's all I knew about it. So
Right.
I spent years dismissing it. Like, what could it cause? Like, there's some uncomfortable pain. I mean, the pain was pretty severe at times, but I never, ever thought it was going to be on my bowel, that the pain I was having when I was going to the bathroom was related, or then years after it would go to my diaphragm.
Right.
It was just, even though I knew, I still, in a way, after so many years, kind of feel cheated of the fact that I didn't understand, or it wasn't made clear to me. And maybe I didn't do my own research. I just honestly don't even know if it was out there at the time, of how bad it could be. And then I watched my mom live with it.
Right.
And that's what she did. My mom, so a little history there, having been born in Italy, my parents got married at 18. My mom was 21 when she had me, and she used fertility treatments in
Wow.
Italy. Yeah.
Wow. At
At
21.
21, exactly.
Goodness.
So her tubes were actually blocked.
Okay.
I think it was one of her tubes at the time. She found a private clinic in southern Italy, and the doctor was incredible. He actually still practices now. But I think she had, I tried to find out in terms of the equivalent of what it would be today. But I really don't know. I don't know if it's more of like a Clomid type thing, but it was, I think she said she had like over 100 fertility shots in order to get pregnant. So it wasn't like an IVF where they actually went in to take anything out, like the follicles, but she did have multiple rounds of fertility medication. And then she had miscarried later on when she was in her 30s, and she stopped trying. I'm an only child.
Wow.
But even then, I think mine and her endometriosis were a bit different. She was very cystic too. So she actually had like cysts the size of grapefruits that she had removed. And I remember kind of growing up and having multiple surgeries. But again, it was the same thing. Like, it was a little bit ablation, we'll clean it up a little bit, but you should be fine.
Right. Right. Because there's no awareness and no education. It's
there really, really wasn't. Yeah. And I didn't. Thinking back, now, knowing what I know now and thinking back, I think it's a little crazy that you don't put two and two together.
Yeah.
But thinking about the pain that I was in, like, how did I think that was normal? Or not normal, but was I okay with that? Or how didn't I push for some kind of, better care?
Yeah. I completely understand. I mean, I would pass out
Yeah.
at school and just be like, oh, it's just my period, go on to the next day. It is crazy, but when there's no awareness and no one's talking about it, and it's something kind of private, you don't want to be like going and telling everyone, well, I had my period and I passed out. When you're 16, it's embarrassing.
Right. It is.
Was your mom diagnosed with endo in Italy? Just curious.
No, they didn't know what it was then.
Okay.
And she didn't have surgeries in Italy. It was when she came to the States.
Okay. That's very interesting. But yeah, of course. I mean, even though you were diagnosed at an early age, right, you're still in the same boat as everybody who wasn't.
Yeah.
And the information is just not out there.
And I remember even just about pain being like 16, 17, 18, I don't even remember. And I remember just couldn't even get to my front door. I got out of my car and I laid on the grass.
Yeah.
And I was pulling myself, like I couldn't even get to the front door. I laid there until my parents got me when they got off of work. I remember the pain being like that severe where you couldn't even move your legs.
Yes. Yes.
It was just incredible. But then I had 2 surgeries. So finally I decided when I graduated college, I finally decided that I was going to have surgery.
Did you do any birth control or anything leading up to that?
Yes, I did a ton of birth control, which my body never agreed with.
Yeah.
Just hormonally, I just always felt a bit crazy on birth control.
Yep.
But I also did Depo-Provera.
Okay.
And I did two separate times in my early 20s after my first surgery, and then in my later 20s after that second surgery.
Did you feel like that helped, just for like listeners who are listening out there, or no?
I know this is an interesting topic. For me, the first time it really did.
Okay.
It really, really did. I did not feel any cramping. I did not have any mood swings. Honestly though, I felt like sterile, if that makes sense.
No,
I just
get
felt
it.
like I was going through life like just very monotone and I didn't really have any feel much. Yes, I really felt that way. But to me, compared to the pain I felt great. So the first time, I had the first surgery, which was ablation. Then I was on Depo-Provera for about 4 years.
Okay. And how old were you when you had your first surgery? I know you said 20, like 19, 20?
I was 21.
Okay.
I was 21. I just had graduated. I was like 20, 21.
And you had ablation surgery.
And I had ablation surgery. And it was, it kind of took about an hour, and I went home same day. And it was, I think at the time they said it was like stage 2, if I remember correctly, or stage 3.
Sure.
And then I kind of healed quickly. And then it did help in terms of the pain a bit. I remember it helping, but then I went on Depo very quickly.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was one or the other.
Sure. Sure. Okay. And then so you have the surgery, you go in the Depo, you have no feelings because your hormones are suppressed essentially.
They're very suppressed, yeah.
But you feel no pain, so that's good. What happens next?
Well, the interesting part about Depo, I felt no pain, but then I ended up with osteopenia.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I remember going to the doctor and I was like, listen, I was cleaning something and bending over and I couldn't get back up. Like it hurt my spine. And he was like, you're too young. I'm not doing a scan on you. He's like, there's no way. They did the scan and I remember them apologizing. I was on the borderline of osteoporosis because of Depo.
Oh my goodness.
So that's when I got off of Depo.
Okay.
And then I said, it's one big blur, but my 20s with endometriosis.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
I remember like waiting a couple years. I had gotten married at that point. Mm-hmm. And like right before I got married, I remember it was like a couple weeks before the wedding, I was sitting like in the living room, and then all of a sudden I got shooting pain from my, like where my ovaries are, like down my leg. And I was like, oh my God, and I collapsed to the floor and I was tears. I remember the tears just automatically started. Never felt pain like that. And I was like dragging my leg and I couldn't even move to get to the phone. And I was like in the fetal position. I had called my brother-in-law. My husband was working in the city right before I got married. And then the pain like had gone away slowly, like after about 40 minutes. And I remember visiting the doctor and he was like, oh, they're bladder spasms. And I'm like, what is a bladder spasm?
Yeah.
I was like, what does that even mean? So
and why would it shoot down my leg
I
if
know,
it's my bladder?
And again, like you take it because you don't know what else to do or who to turn to.
Your doctor,
right. I remember him giving me these like pills to take around with me that like older people take if you have bladder spasms.
Yes.
And I was like, what is this? And then that never happened again. But at that point I realized, like, I think right after we get married, it's time to go back in and see what's going on.
Are you still seeing the same doctor that you and your mom saw?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not anymore.
Okay. At this point, though, are you still seeing?
No, I'm sorry. At this point I was.
Okay.
So he actually did the second surgery again.
Okay.
So I had
ablation number 2.
This time it was like, oh, it's an hour. We'll clean you up. An hour goes by, 2 hours goes by. And my mom's like, my mom and my husband at the time were with me. And they were like, what is going on? Like, what's taking so long? Because they do make it seem like it's a quick cleanup. And then it went to stage 4.
Did you do research or did anyone ever before you had the surgery say the word excision to you?
No.
Okay.
Never. But I did find out after, and they didn't. I've learned over the years, even my more 2 recent surgeries in the last year, you have to ask specific questions.
Yeah.
Because surgeons are just, I guess they do it every day, or to them, it's just what they do. So if you want to know, you really have to be specific on what you ask. And I've learned after many years that in the second surgery I had in my late 20s, they did do a bit of excision.
Okay.
A bit of excision.
Right.
Because I remember reading the report. Yeah.
Right. And you were in there for a long time.
A few hours compared to what they said it was going to be.
Sure. And now he comes out and says you have stage 4. It's spread.
Yeah. And then this is after being on birth control, Depo-Provera. Like this is after doing the things I thought we're
Right.
supposed to suppress it.
Right.
Because
You didn't know.
I didn't know.
Exactly.
I thought, it was supposed to be not like a cure, but it will stop it from spreading, or it will stop it. And I was like, but I did everything. I tortured my body. Like I did everything you told me to do. And now you're telling me it's worse, and I'm only 27.
Yeah. So what do you do after this surgery? You recover, and how do you feel?
After the surgery, I recovered, and I do remember feeling a bit better. I do. But then again, I think I'm used to pushing through.
Yes.
That what you deem as normal or what you deem as tolerable pain is not what another person would deem it to be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So for me, it was just, I remember feeling okay, but some days were really hard. But I would lay on the floor in the fetal position. I would take medication, and then I would get up and I would go to work. Like to me, that's what I did.
That
like
was
you
life.
just,
yes.
Or I remember being on conference calls even after that second surgery and like holding on to the desk, like as if it was a contraction, and waiting for the pain to pass through.
Yes. I fully understand. How's your husband dealing with all of this? I mean, you're newly married. Is he understanding?
He's very, very supportive.
Good.
He's always been very, very supportive. He's never left my side. Yeah.
Good.
He's
hard when you're first married, but
yeah,
I feel like he's probably seen the darkest of things. My husband has seen more than anyone in my entire life. I can tell you that.
Yep.
The laying on the floor and the rocking back and forth, and I need to go to the ER.
Exactly. I've had many of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's been there through it all, and he's kind of seen it. I mean, we've been dating now, married 7 years, but dating 15 years. So he's been there from really the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Just a quick sidebar, because I know you had just been newly married. Okay. So, right. You're living what you deem as normal in pain, as most of us women with endo do. And after your second surgery, what happens after that? Did you go back on birth control or do something after this surgery?
After that surgery, I had gone back on Depo
for
a little while.
Okay.
It was very short-lived. It's interesting, and I don't know, as I was older. But again, to me, it's like, okay, well, I want to start a family eventually. I'm not ready right now. What am I going to do?
Right.
So for me, it's like I just felt stuck.
Right.
And I remember the doctor telling me, like, you have endometriosis. You should start thinking about starting a family. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, this is unfair. Like, I'm not. And I get why now he was saying that at that point a little bit.
Right.
But we had just got married. We had bought a house. I'm like, I just need a couple, like 2 years or something.
Yeah, of course.
So I had gone back on Depo, and then I couldn't handle it the first time. My body was just off. Everyone has very different reactions to medications. And you could have the same medication, take it 2 different times in your life, and have very different reactions.
Yes.
And that's what happened to me. Getting off Depo was one of the hardest things I had to do. Once I stopped taking it, it took me a year to get my period back.
Oh my goodness. And did you just feel like out of sorts?
Yeah. Just to be specific, my breasts were so swollen, so painful, so swollen for a very long time. I guess with the hormones or adjusting to get off, it was really, really hard. And then a year later, I got, I was on it for almost a year. And then a year after that, I got my period.
Okay.
So this
right,
from
like 27 to 28.
No,
you like
29. Yeah.
No period.
I took it about 27, 28, 20, 29. I had about like no period.
Okay. And then what happens when your period comes back? I'm afraid to ask this question.
It was bad. It was really heavy, and it was really painful.
Yeah.
And then at this point I said, we need to, at that point we decided that we wanted to start trying to have a baby.
Okay.
So with that, we tried naturally for a while. Didn't work. I wasn't very surprised, but I figured before I do anything.
Sure.
In my opinion, drastic when you really don't know about certain fertility medications.
Right.
We wanted to try naturally. So we did that for 2 years about.
In those 2 years, how's your period every month? Is it horrible or is it manageable?
It was horrible. And then not only the period, but then things that I know now that I just didn't put together then.
Sure.
Even beyond, going to the bathroom is very painful for me. I would release my bladder, and then I would be crampy.
Yes.
That feeling of like your bladder's full and it releases, and that felt weird. I would try sometimes, like I would sit down flat, like just sit down on a hard chair,
Yeah.
and I would get shooting pains, like from my butt, like all the way up.
Yes.
And it felt like lightning, like jolts of lightning.
Yes.
Going to the bed, I remember like asking my husband or like people, and it was personal, I guess, but I was like, does anyone else cramp when they're trying to go number 2?
Yeah. Or after. I mean,
Or
that's what
after,
happens
like, is
to
that
me.
normal?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like, I feel like I'm going to get sick after. Or pass out.
and then food would just bother me. And every time, like, I always looked like I was 6 months pregnant. The bloating was just out of control. Yeah. I really was very sensitive to a lot of different foods. Like I said, like that very random. And at this point, you're cramping very randomly and sharp, even when you're not having your period or you're not ovulating.
Right.
So it just felt like constant at that point.
Did you take anything to manage it, like Advil, or were you doing any supplements? Like, what were you doing to try to get through?
I took Advil.
Yeah.
I took like 3 Advils, and then it would go away. It would last for like 2 hours, 3 hours, and then I would be okay. I think I was a little lucky that my first like 2 days of my period were really bad, but then I felt a lot better afterwards.
Yeah.
It was more manageable.
Yes.
So I always said if I can get through the first 2 days.
Very similar. I'm very similar.
So I would hope that the first 2 days I didn't have anything crazy at work going on.
Yep.
So I think by the 3rd, 4th day, it was better, or I was just able to kind of get around a bit more.
Were you still like, would you miss work or events or anything still during this period?
Work was hard for me considering the industry.
Yeah.
So for me, it was hard to miss.
Right.
I'm in finance, so there's just always a lot going on. But my social life took a huge toll.
Yeah.
I'm just not. And I realize this even now, like being in my 30s, I feel like from all of it, I became a much more of an introvert than I ever was.
I understand that 100%.
I just don't. And then when I even don't have pain, sometimes I feel like I can be an introvert.
Yeah.
I just feel like I've been used to that kind of like just.
Right. You're
just stepping away from the conversation. Yeah.
It's like you're protecting yourself, though. It's like you almost, it's scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And you just don't know when it's going to hit or when it's going to start. And making plans is difficult and all of that. So I just feel like over the years, I've definitely, it's definitely impacted it in that sense, even in my professional life, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you guys start to try to naturally conceive. What happens? This is now you're like 29, maybe going into 30.
Right.
What happens next?
When I think it was about 30, if I remember correctly, we went to a fertility doctor, and I started researching fertility treatments and what we wanted to do, and we went to one place on Long Island, and then we started with Clomid and with IUIs. We did about 3 of those, and those all failed. It didn't work. And then slowly, I think that later that year, we had done a first IVF treatment. That was actually started off promising, but my issue was that I didn't get a lot of follicles, even with the stimulation.
Right.
So my odds just wasn't as great.
Right.
I think I was only getting, if I was lucky, like 5 or 6.
Okay.
So the first time, actually, all of them fertilized, but none of them made it to day 5 as blastocysts.
Okay. And so for people who haven't gone through, like I have never gone through this process, how many follicles should you have?
Everyone's very different.
Yeah,
everyone's very, very different.
Okay.
I've known women who have had like 3 on certain cycles, and women who have had like 20, 30 follicles.
Okay. So it's very different.
It's very, very huge. It's a very huge,
Okay.
It's a big range.
Okay.
So it really depends. And I wasn't stimulating to the levels that I guess other people were.
And does your IVF doctor know you have endo?
They do.
Okay.
They do.
Okay.
And we had spoken about surgery at that time. And then we said that we were going to try to see, because at that time, even some doctors think, at that time, it was only 4 years ago, Some doctors do express some concern that it could be an extreme measure.
Sure.
And there's a lot of complications.
Right.
So if you can get pregnant without doing it,
of course,
they don't think about the pain and the other things.
Right.
So for them, it was like, we'll try IVF. Let's see if that works first. So
Right.
the first one did not.
Okay.
The second one, which was a few months later, which in my opinion, I think was my mistake because I was just very eager at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I should have taken a break, I think more emotionally, mentally.
Sure.
My body too just wasn't up to it at that point.
Right.
I remember taking the injections and just like hysterically crying right after each one sometimes, not
Right.
even from the pain. It's just like, it's an emotional toll.
Right. Not only are you in pain and not feeling well every day, you're also going through all of these hormone fluctuations, right?
Right.
And trying to do something and not maybe feeling like adequate. I don't know, but like I can only imagine that feeling.
There is a lot for me personally, and I know it's not the right feeling, or it's not like I don't know. I still work through it, but to me there was just a lot of shame that came with it.
Sure.
Not like shame in a bad way, but just
guilt.
just a lot of like guilt and
Right.
shame, and just like,
yes.
it wasn't my fault. Should I have
No.
done this earlier? Did I not listen to doctors when they were trying to say, like, did I not learn from my mom?
Right.
What is this doing to me? Like that, I think that's when it all started to hit me.
Yes.
When I was taking the fertility medication, that like, this is a problem now. Like, this is an issue. And at that point, I'm in my early 30s.
Right. 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 And of course, obviously it sounds like you already know it. Obviously it's not your fault and nothing.
Oh, no. Yeah. It's those things that your
Of
mind
course.
keeps
Oh.
playing, that it's just coming to terms with a lot.
I still have a lot of that daily now in life.
Yeah.
Just guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to work through.
It is. Okay. So you do the second round.
Failed miserably. I had none of the follicles fertilized the second time around. It was a miserable cycle. And I remember, honestly, I found out, which is another thing that doctors should not do. They should not give you this, give you the results when you're at work.
Yes. Oh gosh.
I remember being just in the bathroom at work, just in the fetal position, like against, even just like on the floor against the wall, and just hysterical. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
I can't do this to myself. I need a break. I need to figure out what's going on.
Right.
That's when we took a break for about a year.
Which is
We said
good.
I needed time to breathe. Yeah. I needed time to breathe. So I took a break. I was like, I can't do this anymore. At that point, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the mentality that if it makes it worse in a year from now, mentally, I was not in a great spot.
Yeah.
And I needed time to just get my thoughts together. And you need time to detox the medication.
Yeah.
Those hormones are it's a lot.
Yes.
You just don't feel like yourself anymore. The decisions you're making, the thoughts you're thinking, it was a lot for me. I felt very sensitive to the medication.
Yes.
And it was the second time, because we added another, it's called like microdose Lupron.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking almost 5 shots a day.
Yeah.
For like the 2 weeks period, like around the 14K. So it was it was too much for me. Yeah.
And your tiny little body is just like, I cannot handle this.
Right.
Yeah.
So at that point, we took about a year break.
And good for you for recognizing that. Seriously, though. I mean, that's good.
It was a really difficult decision to make, but I had to find a way to just I didn't feel healthy.
Yes.
One of it was the endo, which I still wasn't dealing with, right? But I just didn't know who to turn to and where to go at the time.
Right.
So then we took a year break. I went to next year. We said we were going to start again. I went to another same fertility clinic, different doctor. He was in the city.
Okay.
And then he's like, listen, I need to figure out what's going on with your body. Like, let's go back to basics. He wanted to start again with an IUI, but injectable. So rather than going in and retrieving the follicles, you do the injections and then you kind of let it play out by itself, which is a little easier because for IVF, it is surgery. Like you're under general anesthesia that they're taking out, and it's a toll on your body as well.
Yes.
But I remember him saying to me, this was really hard. Like, there's a chance that if you do get pregnant, you could have multiples.
Right.
And then at that point, we have to decide what to do. If it's too many, fertilize. And he was very serious about the conversation. He sat me down, what the risks were. And I was like, for me in my head, I was like, it's not going to work anyway. Like for that point, I was just so jaded by the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, fine. I'll do it because you want me to, and you want to see how my body reacts with this.
Right.
But I don't have a lot of hope here.
Sure.
And I think that was my mistake too, going in that way with that kind of mindset.
Right. But based on history, you just had that. It's just how you felt,
No, yeah.
Okay.
It was hard to like think otherwise, I guess.
Yeah.
So it didn't work. And again, I got the call at work. And at this point he's like, Anna, and he's an incredible doctor. And he was like, Anna, I'm sorry. And I was like, I knew it. It's fine. He's like, let's, come to see me. Let's figure it out. At that point, around that time when I was going to the bathroom, I had blood in my stool.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I remember telling him, when we met with him, I brought it up. And he was like, I need you to see a doctor. He's like, I'm not comfortable with this, rightfully so. He did a physical himself. And he was like, I want you to see this doctor. I think I want you to get this taken care of. If he feels like we can continue this, we will. But I want to take care of you first.
I love this.
And it was
doctor.
The first time.
I love this doctor so much.
Me too. Trust me. It was the first time someone's ever really said that to me. Right. Yeah. So in that way, he's like, I just need, and my husband was always great. And he's always had said the same thing. So my husband loved him too.
Yeah.
It was like, I need you to be healthy before you could have a child. I need you to be in the right state of mind. Like you can't put yourself through this.
Right. Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So that's when I went to see the surgeon. I don't know if we're allowed to say surgeon names.
You can, you can, but it's fine if you don't either. It doesn't matter.
So at that point I went, and it was Dr. Seshkin.
Okay.
So I went to go see him, and he was like, I told him everything, and he was like, we need to do surgery. And I was like, wait, hold up. Like, let me breathe here.
Right.
Like, I need you to explain things to me. And he just very, very opinionated. And he was like, I need to go in. I need to see like what you're up against, what you're doing. I remember him, writing out the chart of like my ovaries and what's going on. And I remember explaining everything to him. And he's like, we need to do surgery. And I walked out of there and I'm like, I'm not ready. I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Right.
Like, I've been through too much. The 2 surgeries.
Yeah.
I've suffered for years.
Yes.
I've had all these failed different, between the IUIs and the IVFs and the IUI again, it's just been a roller coaster of a few years, especially. I was like, I don't know if I can do this again.
Right.
We decided to do it. And about 3 weeks later, I was in for surgery.
What year was that?
That was last year.
Okay.
September.
So 2018.
September 27th. Okay. Yeah. And he went in. And then afterwards, 46 lesions removed.
Wow.
41 positive for endometriosis.
Wow.
He said it was splattered everywhere. It was on my bladder. It was on my bowels. It was on my sigmoid colon. It was all over the walls. It was it was just everywhere.
Yeah.
I was pretty lucky that the reproductive organs, I guess, were pretty okay.
Okay.
Like my tubes weren't blocked, which I've had to, I think they're called HSGs or whatever they're called.
Is that
check?
Yeah.
I had that done a couple years when I was doing the IVFs, and they weren't blocked. So that was good news at the time too. The ovaries had some scarring from previous surgeries, as they would. Mm-hmm. So they weren't in the best of shape, but he said that they were doable in terms of getting pregnant.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a really, really, really hard recovery for me.
Yes.
Really hard.
Did you feel
recovery.
Almost justified though when you found out that you had 40 lesions removed, and makes sense why you weren't feeling well? And
it did. And I just felt, I don't remember. I feel like my world was like just flipped upside down.
Yeah. Because
you have it. And this is where there are women who are misdiagnosed, but as well. And that I couldn't imagine what that must go through life feeling like you don't know what it is and how scary that feeling is. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling a little bit like, I know I've had it, but how could it do this much damage? Like, why didn't I know? I never knew it could spread to all these different areas. I didn't know it could impact going to the bathroom. And then when I started seeing blood,
Right.
it was just, and I started doing a lot of research then, and I was shocked. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it was. I really was just really shocked. I couldn't grasp it at that point.
Yeah.
In terms of like what it can do to you and why I didn't realize it. Or and I think I blamed myself a lot of it because I felt, why didn't I put two and two together? Why didn't I understand this better? Why didn't I try to educate myself more about this? Like because you're living so long with all this pain and you have this disease, but there was just.
But you can't even feel the guilt because now, I would say now, maybe in the past 2 years, there's a lot more information out there, but it's very basic. And honestly, even the excision specialists that are out there, and thank goodness for them, they still don't know everything. I mean, I recently read an article that said a disease has to be studied for over 10 to 20 years to have a real understanding. We haven't had that for endometriosis yet. And every woman I talk to on this podcast, on Instagram, all over the world, everyone is affected differently by it. So there's no rhyme or reason, and there's some consistencies, but everybody else has a different symptom. So it's really hard to correlate what's going on.
Yeah, you're right, very different for different women. It just doesn't follow the same pattern.
And you could eat dairy your whole life and feel totally fine. And then I'll meet another woman who eats dairy and it causes her endo to totally flare up. I mean, it's very interesting disease. I think it's very complex, and I think it's systematic, and there's just not enough info out there about it yet. And I also want to chime in just really quick for anyone who's listening. Lesions, what Anna is talking about, are the actual implants of endometriosis. And when you have excision surgery, the doctor actually cuts that out. I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's so important to remove the lesion because it is literally implanted in all of these organs that Anna just mentioned. And if you just get ablation, it takes off the surface level, but the lesion actually doesn't go away. It's still potentially there, which is what causes all the problems and pain and so many things. And I recently read an article from Dr. Passover, who I think is amazing, who said that the lesions act as benign tumors. So just think about, you had 42 benign tumors in your abdomen. No wonder you were in pain.
Right.
So
and always, yeah.
So just a little background for everybody. And you know what? You could have 5 lesions and have just as much pain as someone with 40. So
very true.
There's no distinction between that as well. It's just, having 40 is a lot and affects you, obviously, in the way that it's affected you. So, okay, so you have the surgery and it's a long recovery. Tell me a little bit about what happens with this and what happens next.
So when I sat down to go through the pathology report for that surgery, Dr. Seshkin had told me that they saw it also on my diaphragm from the abdominal side. So from underneath, he saw about 6 to 8 lesions on the diaphragm. And again, things start to click. Like, why am I always short of breath? Why do I have this pain underneath my rib cage? Why does my back always hurt, like the muscles going into my collarbone and my back? And I thought, it's like, you're working in finance, my bag is always heavy, I'm commuting 2 hours each way a day. I've been seeing an acupuncturist for years on my back, thinking that it was more like muscular. I've been to the ER before because of this pain, and I was told to have like costochondritis. Just really, and again, things are just like, again, it's that feeling of, how did I not understand this? How did I not know that this was an issue?
Well, and for diaphragmatic, they say it's very rare. I don't think it is.
It's not rare.
I don't. And what you're saying,
I strongly disagree with that statement. Yeah.
I'm really happy that you actually just said all of the things you said, because I literally have goosebumps right now from head to toe, because I have been having a lot of right side rib pain, and I have neck and shoulder pain on that side. And I literally thought it was from carrying a heavy work bag. Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, it could be, but
could be.
It was, again, yeah.
Okay. So you're going through and he tells you, did they remove them or did they not remove them?
No, he didn't touch it at the point because I wasn't symptomatic. So because I didn't before, and again, I didn't know I was symptomatic because I didn't know what it could have been. So I didn't even, whoever thought endometriosis would climb to your lungs or your diaphragm. So I didn't say anything because I didn't know.
Right.
So again, and I really thought, I mean, I do commute a long way. My bags are always really heavy. I use my right hand a lot for so many things. Like you're on your phone, you're typing the mouse. So I always just felt, and my muscles always click and I always feel like it's muscular. And then you learn that a lot of the same muscles that are connected where your diaphragm are just go into your back.
For women who think they may have this, can you tell us like what the pain, like where and what the pain feels like?
So there's two, for me, I think a lot of women, it could be different. For me,
sure.
It was literally like right under the rib cage, more towards in the middle of your chest, where I literally, like, if you put your hand, like, and your fingers, like, underneath, like you're trying to grab the rib cage, like right under there. And it was like a gnawing feeling.
Okay.
Like just this, this constant gnawing feeling. And then randomly I would get like where your shoulder blade is, pain, like severe pain in the shoulder blade that would it comes up. It could be like where your tip of your shoulder is too.
Okay.
Like on the top where like the bone is. And then sometimes I would get these pains like where my collarbone.
Okay.
Like just pain in the collarbone area. But the muscular pain was so bad sometimes in the back, like where my shoulder blade is, that I remember I would have to heating pad right on that area, really hot, and I would have to sleep with my arm like over my head. And I felt like that was the only way. But I seriously thought it was like nerves, like an issue with nerves. And then sometimes it can travel like up my neck.
This is insane to me right now.
I figured that it was just nerve pain. Like it
same.
was.
I have this exact same thing. Just so you know.
I
thought it was my neck.
Yeah. So I had surgery. September 27th.
Okay.
Early January, I'm in the ER because I couldn't even walk from my bedroom to the kitchen without being out of breath. And I was like, what is going on? And I was just in tears and I couldn't eat. At that point, like I was also a little depressed. I'm like, I just had for me, it was a major surgery for recovery.
Yes.
I had some complications, like not complications, but I had a lot of like acid reflux issues from the first surgery. I remember throwing up in the hospital. My stomach wasn't the same. I was like, what is going on? And I was just not in a good place. And I went to the ER. I went to see Dr. Sechkin and I was like, I told him everything. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, let's see how you feel. Just, you just got out of surgery. Give it some time. We'll monitor it. I think I was going to go for like another MRI or something.
Were you on your period? Just quick question. Were you on your period in January when you went to the ER? With the shortness of breath?
Was not. Here's the thing though. Ovulation is actually harder for me sometimes than my period. So I can be more symptomatic when I ovulate. Okay. And now after these two surgeries, I can cramp more sometimes when I ovulate than when I get my period. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, like I don't remember. But I know that the shortness of breath did kick up a lot more when I was about to get my period. Okay. And then I ended up in the ER again in early February, and they pretty much did an emergency surgery.
Oh my goodness.
Shortness of breath? The shortness of breath was really bad. The pain was really bad. And Dr. Sechkin was like, okay, we're done. Like, we have to see what's going on here. So he obviously he took it very seriously. He got other doctors available. I actually knew the other doctor at the time. That I guess he consolidated like a team of doctors because I knew eventually I was going to have the surgery. So like I was being proactive to meet with them in advance. So I was happy I did that. So I knew who they were. Yes. And so we had a thoracic surgeon. At this point, honestly, I was still having blood in my stool. So he had other doctors there as well, just to see like, is there anything else going on? So it was just a mess.
And I'm sure you're a mess too. You're like, I just had this major surgery in September.
That tested my overall mental stability, honestly. I'm sure. It was just really, really, really hard for me.
Quick question. After the September surgery, did you go on birth control or anything, or were you just...
No.
Okay. Okay. So
I didn't do anything.
So you have to have this surgery now. It's February of this year, 2019. And tell me about it.
So February, I went in. I again, they went from the abdominal side. They saw that there was like the 8 spots. And I remember them telling me afterwards that they said, okay, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't explain her pain or shortness of breath. Like there's something else going on here. They pushed down my liver and they saw like a huge glob of like endometriosis and a chocolate cyst that was in the diaphragm.
Oh my goodness.
So at this point I have this huge chocolate cyst that thank goodness did not burst on me. That's touching the liver. So it's up against the liver.
Oh my gosh.
And these blobs of just, and that's how he explained it to me. He literally explained it to me that it was like just a sausage.
Blobs.
Like a sausage.
Sorry to laugh, but
no, I don't even know if he said blob. I think the other doctor did, but I think he said it was like just like a sausage-like endometriosis. It was just, you couldn't tell that it was like even different.
You're so
like
lucky.
lesions.
You're so lucky you had that surgery.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember when I'd gone to that ER that second time with breathing, I just remember something in me was like, something's not right.
Yeah.
You have to listen to your gut. Because
Yep.
I remember this strong, my husband's like, is everything okay? Like, you're so determined to do, like, what is going on? The first surgery took you a while to come to terms with it. I said, something isn't right.
Yeah.
Like, I just felt it. And then honestly, that recovery wasn't really difficult for me. It was difficult in the sense, like, obviously you have the chest tube and like that gets taken out afterwards. But the shortness of breath slowly got better. Like being able to take a deep breath was a little difficult. I guess, they had to take out a portion of my diaphragm because once they popped the chocolate cyst, they had to like kind of stitch that back together.
Right.
So obviously your diaphragm is now a bit different. I was very clear, like right before I went in, what I wanted them to do and didn't want them to do. So there was an option of getting like a pleurodesis, which is kind of when they adhere your lung to your chest wall. I didn't have any known collapses.
Right.
And I still had the chocolate cyst.
Right.
With all of that, right? So every woman's so different. And I told them I didn't want that. I wasn't comfortable with that. So, it was great communication. I knew what I was going in for at the time, even though it was an emergency situation, and they were very clear on like what they were going to try to do.
Right.
And it's now been 6 months since that last surgery.
How do you feel, my dear?
Honestly, I'm getting my period now. I'm due. I'm still a little short of breath. Some months are better than others.
Okay.
I still have a little bit of that pain, but again, your diaphragm's also stitched at this point. Right. There's a lot of scar tissue that's happening.
Yeah.
I do acupuncture religiously, like every week, and cupping, which helps me tremendously.
Okay.
But compared to how I felt, it is night and day.
Yeah.
It is just, you have to understand that it's not like a miracle fix.
No.
Going through these surgeries.
You're still
and that,
you have a chronic illness.
And your body is, it laparoscopic for the most part, right? It can be, but it's still invasive to a point in terms of the organs that you're touching and what you're doing. Yep. But compared to the alternative,
right. Right.
But it's a process, right? So I have to really remind myself that I need to just be very patient and compassionate with myself and allow myself time to heal.
Yeah.
And
you're
then
amazing.
And the feeling that it can come back, right? I think that there's sometimes I just want to be honest with myself because I feel like it's easier than even though I've had it and I've known I've had it for so long, I've still felt along the way that I was always shocked by something.
Yeah.
So I tried to just be like, listen, like this is, like you said, it's a chronic disease. This is not the end.
Right.
We're still going to go through maybe more fertility struggles. So there's a long road ahead, but it's the little wins, I think, along the way that have been helpful. Yeah.
And do you feel, better than you ever have? Your period pain, I know shortness of breath, but for me, like I still have cramping, but nothing like I can function like a normal human on my period. I can like do things.
I completely agree. I think last month, because that surgery where it was more of the like kind of abdominal side was in September. So last month was probably the first time that I cramped a little bit more than usual. but nothing
Right. Like you can
if I
take some
have,
Advil and go out.
yeah, I took 2 Advils, and then I only took it once in the morning, and I never had to take it again the rest of the
Right.
day,
Right.
which never ever happened.
It's like, and that's how like normal people are. I mean, sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like how normal people are with their
Yeah.
period. That's
And
good. See, that's
yeah.
all progress. And I think sometimes when we're healing from surgery, it's like we miss the little things because it's so small in the
Yeah.
journey, you know?
And to the point you made earlier about food, though, like I've realized that I was very strict and since September in terms of what I was eating and what I, especially that I wasn't feeling very well, like after the surgeries. But once the summer started and I was much more relaxed on like my food, and I've noticed a huge difference in terms of, my cramps getting a little bit worse, or like the shortness of breath getting a little bit worse. So
Right.
it is really have to just continue to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Inflammation is really a huge problem for us ladies with endo. And I don't know about you, but it was very hot here in Michigan, and I overdid it in the heat one day, and I was down for the count the whole next day because I must have just been so inflamed. I was just in a lot of pain.
Right.
And I ate yesterday, a great example. I ate a piece of, it was, even though it was dairy-free and gluten-free cake, but it was loaded with sugar, and I immediately started feeling pain come on. And I hate to say that, but anything that causes inflammation in your body like that, you could still potentially have a small flare up. Again, nothing like the
Like we did.
horrible
Yeah.
pain, but it is a lifestyle change. I mean, it's a chronic illness, but you sound like everything you did, you needed to do. And I'm so grateful that you found these doctors that
Me
could
too.
help you.
Beyond grateful. That really care.
Yes.
That
Yes.
really, really, really care. Between Dr. Setchkin, between the fertility doctors, between the thoracic surgeons, like they really, really, it's hard to find. It really is hard to find, especially having endo, right? God knows how many doctors we've all seen.
Yes.
In the past. So it's not, they really dedicate their life to.
Right. Yes. And for people who are listening that don't have a surgeon or specialist by you, it's worth traveling if you can make that happen. Do a fundraiser, anything you can do to try and get help from an excision specialist is the best way to try and go if you can make it happen.
Definitely.
So is there anything else that you've done that you want to recommend to women that are listening that you felt was helpful? I mean, acupuncture, you sound like you're very serious and very felt help from that.
I think that was huge for me. I think that cupping was really big for my back, even now in terms of the just healing from the surgery for my diaphragm. That was huge for me. And infrared saunas helped me a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if it's like the sweating of toxins or just like the feeling, but they really, really clarity of mind as well as just like my body. I just always feel a lot better. So even like 20 minutes in infrared sauna, even a week, I just definitely makes a huge difference for me.
And I do think like after all the surgeries we've had, our nerves are like hyper aware too. So I feel like as time goes on, it does get better. But in the recovery process, yes, doing all of those things that help relax the muscles and the nerves around all of the areas you have surgery, I think definitely is a huge help.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add or tell women who are suffering with endo that may be on the beginning of their journey?
I think education. I think for me, education is huge. It's finding a doctor that you can trust. It's not just taking for whatever they say it is what it is, and just really being an advocate for yourself. I mean, we hear this all the time, but it's really true.
It's really
I think
important.
nowadays, I think if you're a bit younger now and you feel like you might have endometriosis, I think there's more out there now than there ever was, or more doctors who have experience with an excision that ever did, and just feeling out what's right for you, but finding a doctor who's going to listen, and then really understanding what your options are.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And something I always tell women too is go in armed. So track your pain, write it in a notebook every single day, get all of your medical records in a binder or a Google Doc or whatever. If you go into a doctor with all of your information, they will listen. They have to listen to you. If you go in, oh, I think I had pain that it's just, if you go in armed, I do think that there is more, I don't want to say like respect, but it almost forces them to listen more. And if they don't listen, thank you, next. Move on to the next doctor.
Exactly. And for women's health in general, not just for endometriosis, but just, knowing your body, I think is important. I mean, after the last surgery in February, I went to get cleared for fertility, just to make sure like everything was okay. And then the doctor had requested that I get a mammogram and a sonogram. And then they did find a lump. They found one on each breast. And then I had it biopsied. The left one came back normal. The right one came back as benign, but that it was still abnormal. So I had gone for a breast surgeon, and recently, about a month ago, I had a lumpectomy.
Anna.
Yeah. It came back as a benign papilloma, so I was very thankful.
Okay.
But I found a lump, right? So it's just about like, even, I know this is another thing it's like saying the diaphragmatic endo is rare. It's like getting mammograms at 40 or 45. I just think, check your breast, understand your body in terms of your pain for endo. It's just about self-awareness for women's health, just across the board.
Yep.
And it's really important.
And trust your gut. If you know something's wrong, just like you said, you knew something was wrong, you went to the ER and you had that emergency surgery, you know your body better than anybody else.
Correct.
Scream. If you need to scream for people to listen to you, go in there. If your gut tells you something's wrong, something's probably wrong. It's not in your head.
I completely agree. And I think that's said to us a lot.
Yes.
I don't know. It's because we're women or whatever the case is, but it's not in your head.
No.
It's definitely not in your head.
No.
And no one should make you feel that way.
Yep. And if
or
they
belittle you in that kind of way. Yeah.
Yep. If they do, move on or ask for another doctor, because you know your body better than anybody else.
Right.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and taking the time out today. Really appreciate it. I think this is going to be very helpful for all of our listeners. Thank you very much for listening to episode 8 of the Cycle Podcast with Anna. I want to thank her for her bravery, for sharing her endo journey. I felt like I learned a great deal about thoracic endo in this month's podcast. I hope it brought you value. If this podcast does help you and you like the content and information, or if you don't, please go rate us in iTunes for Apple Podcasts. That will help us get more reach. And my main goal is to just help build awareness about endometriosis. Again, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on my website. All my contact information is there, www.melissaboudreau.com, linked in the podcast, so you don't have to go look up my last name. Or you can find me on Instagram, which is linked on my website. Thank you again for listening. I hope you're well. Take care.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.